Our next presenter will be Dave DiBiase, and he'll introduce his topic.
Hey, thanks to the organizers and all the support personnel and volunteers who put so much into making this conference run smooth. And thanks to you all for being here this hour. I should start off with a little disclaimer about our maybe somewhat presumptuous title. Back in 1991, Brian Harley stopped by Penn State University and gave this talk, Can There Be a Cartographic Ethics, as part of the Venerable Coffee Hour series. So we've appropriated his title with respect and affection. This is a bespoke project. We took this on when the call for papers came out. We said, Anthony and I said, you know, we really should do something about this, especially since I live about 12 miles away from here. So we did a whole bunch of stuff. Much of it we won't be able to discuss in a 15-minute time frame. If you remind me in the Q&A period, I'll point you to a recorded version that has a fuller treatment of these topics. For now, I'll say that the things that we try to do is just to identify and characterize master's programs that are branded as spatial or geospatial or geographic data science in the period August to September 2022. And then we tried to assess the prevalence of ethics-related content in academic program and course descriptions. I'll have more to say about that methodology. So the first I ever heard of spatial data science, I guess, was when Luke Anselin referred to it in this blog post for the University Consortium for Geographic Information Science. He said this was a rather kind of dour blog in general, but he made the observation that he thought that GI science was morphing into spatial data science. I thought that was interesting. Then last year, 2021, Alex Singleton and Danny Arribas-Bell from the University of Liverpool issued this manifesto. Actually, it's very, very polite manifesto. It's British, I guess. Basically, they're pointing out that there should be a thing called geographic data science as a complement to GI science, because in their words, GI scientists have a lot to learn from data science and vice versa. Data science, they felt, had a lot to gain from GI science. And in particular, they emphasized that what data science had to gain was the emphasis within GI science on ethical issues and critical approaches. And so that resonates with a long thread in our field about ethics. It's been a topic since Brian Harley published Deconstructing the Map in 1987, if memory serves, and the Code of Ethics that Will Craig proposed in 1993, and then John Pickles' Ground Truth in 1995. Ever since then, there's been concern about ethics of varying degrees of enthusiasm. I think right about now, maybe around this year, we're kind of in an ethics moment. The Ethical Geo and the Benchmark Initiative released the Locus Charter within the past year. AAG had a webinar series that some of you might have taken in on geoethics. And then there's this paper that Dawn Wright and Tris Nelson and Mike Goodchild published on accelerating ethics, empathy, and equity in geographic information science, which had a lot to do with the theme of this conference. It's really a clarion call for a revitalized attention to ethics in our field. I'm going to skip some of this. Like I said, we have a fuller treatment recorded. Now I'm going to see if I can, let's see. I'm going to say yes. Yeah, okay, here we go. I'm navigating out now to the actual program website. Let's see if I can get that screen maximized. So at Penn State, online geospatial education has been around for a while. It started off with a certificate program in GIS was 1999. And that kind of graduated to a professional master's degree in GIS in 2003. So we're coming up on 20 years. Spatial data science, in my view, is kind of where specialized programs in GIS were 20 years ago, right? They're just starting to take shape and coalesce as a distinctive approach. And here, this is really Anthony's vision for kind of a next stage. Let's see if I can get this to scroll. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so really, Anthony has argued that spatial data science is the emergent next step, next stage in the evolution of geospatial technologies enabled by big data, prediction algorithms, and geovisual analytics. Let me scroll back up. So ethics is a very explicit part of the experience at Penn State. For one thing, Penn State, like most universities, requires graduate students, some places all students, to do training in the responsible conduct of research. And we try to meet and exceed students' expectations. That's something that we've said from the very beginning of our program. So students at Penn State can fulfill the ethics requirement for graduate students in one of two ways. Many students opt for a free instructor-led 12-hour online training that involves both the responsible conduct of research and a focus on moral reasoning in the geospatial realm. And now recently, we launched a 3-credit graduate seminar in spatial data science ethics, which has been a blast for me to teach, and is off to a good start, I think. Let's see if I can tab back now. Okay, oopsie daisy. All right, so this at the end of the summer this year, I did a search online in multiple languages with lots of different keywords, trying to find spatial data science programs around the world, and we found 13 programs that we could actually assess. That is, they had published enough about their programs and their course descriptions that we could assess them. We also found 8 comparable graduate programs of various kinds, but for one reason or another, we couldn't include them in the assessment. Usually there wasn't adequate data. And there are of course, two bachelor's programs in geographic or spatial data science as well. As you might guess, the programs are clustered a bit. Let's see if I can, I need to go to the web map, don't I? Okay, it doesn't want to go to the web map right now. That's okay. I would, if I had that ability, I would just zoom in and show you clusters. Liverpool being part of that cluster in the United Kingdom, Universitat Münster, another one in Germany, and in the US, a number of programs, comparable programs as well. So for methodology, we borrowed the methodology that we've discovered in this publication in PeerJ. These folks were trying to assess, Oliver and McNeil, were assessing the alignment of data science curriculums at the undergraduate level, 18 programs that they found, with a document published by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine that set forth 10 concepts that they felt were most critical for developing what they call data acumen. And those concepts appear in the graph at the right. These are the 10 concepts. One of those being ethical problem solving. So what these folks did was to pretty much what we tried to do. They identified 18 programs that were adequately documented that they could assess the alignment of those programs or their strengths in relation to those 10 concepts. And as you can see, for ethics was pretty low by comparison, and they made a summative statement that they felt that the attention to ethics in data science curricula at that time, 2021, was really inadequate to support professional practice in data science. Okay, so here's the rubric that they developed to be able to do those assessments. This is just part of the rubric. This is just that part about ethics. And notice that there are five categories that they analyzed. And for each of those, say for ethical precepts for data science and research, for a school to get a maximum rating of 4, they had to have a required course covering that topic, and it had to be explicit in the course description. Same for privacy and confidentiality, responsible conduct of research, ability to identify junk science, and ability to detect algorithmic bias. Now, we could argue about the choice of these rubric items. We adopted them because this was done and applied thoughtfully and rigorously. We can have the conversation later about whether it's the right rubric for spatial data science. This is, again, I don't have time to go into, I wish I could go in and show you some detail, but this is the rubric we did for our own program. And you'll recognize the rubric criteria, and the list goes down for all 5. And what we did was to document courses that were documented such that they fulfilled the rubric at the level indicated. So we went through that for Penn State. One of the interesting things about it was that for Penn State, just 3 courses out of almost 30 corresponded for all of the scoring on this rubric. So one of the supplementary questions is, what does that say about our curriculum and others? Now, if you see the recorded version of this, I go into a explanation of how we dealt with the mismatch between what people actually teach and what's said in their course curricula, in their syllabi, or in their course descriptions. Suffice it to say for now that we found by interviewing our own faculty that faculty themselves, by a factor of 3, claim that they teach topics related to ethics, but it doesn't show up with their course curriculum. So we call that the understatement factor, which you have to keep in mind during all of these assessments. So if you see this, if you can see this URL up here, you can follow that to, I didn't mean to go that way. You can follow that to the live Google Sheet that has the assessments for all of the programs that we were able to assess. And time doesn't permit me to go into those now. We could talk about them during the Q&A if you wish. So here is, this might look familiar. This is Oliver and McNeil's score of the ethics criterion with a mean across programs of just slightly more than 1.5. This is our scoring of the 13 programs we found with a mean across programs of 2, a little bit higher. We didn't do any statistics on this because we don't think we can draw any conclusions comparing master's programs to undergraduate programs. But really, we wanted to look at this as a way to kind of affirm that what we were doing and the way we were assessing these course descriptions was at least comparable to what was done in previous work. This is the summary of the whole story of all of the results, and let me walk you through this complex diagram. Along the x-axis at the top, these are the institutions that have geo or spatial or geospatial data science programs that we were able to find and assess. These are the 5 rubric criteria that we adopted from the literature. And then in each of these cells are the scores that we found based on explicit references to ethical issues in each of the course descriptions. The means by program, by institution, show up along the x-axis. And equally interesting, the row means are shown here, meaning that privacy and confidentiality and responsible conduct of research tend to get better treatment than ethical precepts for data science and codes of conduct, or the ability to identify junk science, or the ability to detect algorithmic bias. The main take home from this diagram is that some institutions really foreground ethical issues in their curricula, in their program descriptions, in their course descriptions. It's right up front. It's part of their, dare I say it, it's part of their brand. It's part of how they position themselves in the community and to their students, to their clientele. Other programs, not so much. And some of these are at a disadvantage, like USC. I'm sure the understatement factor applies at USC because they only have one-sentence course descriptions, both in their catalog and on their website. The whole, entire courses are in one and maybe two sentences. So, how's ethics going to get in there? So a lot of understatement there. But the fact is that some places foreground ethical issues and other places not so much. Our argument is, and I think it's consistent with the folks at Liverpool, is that it makes sense for geospatial data science programs to foreground ethical issues because that's a part of our heritage going all the way back to Brian Harley and scholars of that time. So I think I'm probably right about at the end of my time. Is that right? Okay. So I just wanted to wrap by saying that we've been dealing formally with ethics education for a good many years, and the interesting thing is that our field evolves perhaps towards spatial data science in one of its dimensions. All of those ethical issues persist, but lots of new ones come up as well, and some of those are listed here. The feedback I've gotten from teaching this seminar now twice with graduate students at Penn State is that students find this really interesting. I mean, they really dig into it. And the kind of students who are attracted to this are the kind of students you really love to teach. So we're proud of this activity at Penn State, and we hope that some of this information is valuable for you. And at this point, I'll invite my collaborator and my successor and my boss, Anthony Robinson, to the stage to help with questions. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time for a couple questions. So Eileen wants to ask one in the back there.
Oh, well, she gets first dibs for sure.
Hey, fantastic. I think this is a real example of something that a lot of people can follow. But my question is, given the length of time that you've offered these two different ways of teaching about ethics, what are you seeing over the long term? And is there any way to gauge whether the people that you've been teaching have successfully been engaging with ethical questions and responses in any way?
I can answer the second part, but why don't you answer you want to take the first part?
Yeah, the part of the first part of your question that's really interesting to contemplate is whether or not we require a full class versus a workshop. So that's something that I've been wrestling with. And we've decided to just be aggressively advising people to take the entire course. And that comes from a spirit of thinking about this as trying to make it maybe a little bit less optional because we want to insist that our graduates have at least some exposure in that way. I think you've asked a great question though, and how do you know that it matters? But David just showed me his SRTEs from the most recent class. That's our student evaluation. So we do see reflection in those comments where people say things to us about how they react to this. Right at the moment, these are mostly students who are self-selecting to take the bigger class versus the workshop. And so I do expect pushback from some folks who will prefer to take more techniques courses versus what they might see as soft skills that they don't necessarily need. I mean, I'm just being honest as someone who gets lots of feedback from prospective students about programs. So I think that's going to be a challenge for us to kind of drive through that a bit.
In terms of your question about impact, I think you put your finger on what's really the most important question and perhaps the most fundamental weakness of what we've done here. And I want to read a couple sentences out of the script that I prepared for the recorded version, because it speaks not only to your question, Aileen, but also to what this whole conference has been about. So very quickly, in 2012, a couple of researchers named May and Luth published a quasi-experimental field study showing that formal ethics education, whether embedded within domain subject courses or delivered in standalone ethics courses, can positively affect students' empathy, that is, the ability to take different perspectives, their moral efficacy, that is, their confidence in one's ethical abilities, and their moral courage, that is, the unwavering commitment to carry out tasks in an ethical manner despite potential negative consequences. So way beyond doing an inventory of who is teaching what and who says that they're teaching what they're teaching, much more fundamental to that is a study of the effectiveness of this kind of instruction and research. That's a much bigger project. In 15 minutes, I don't even think I could say the abstract of that study.
Okay, yeah, I don't see any other questions, so I guess we'll just move on. So, do you have one online? So there's one online question.
Okay.
So.
I will have to follow up with that because I don't have the title memorized. The authors are May and Luth, L-U-T-H. I do have a copy of it right over there in my folder. I don't know if time permits me to go over there and get it.
Actually, what we can do is he could just put it in the chat.
We'll put it in the chat. Yes, thank you for that question. It's it's an impressive study.
Nicely done.